Okay, so there's a lot of actual discussion between Zonji and also Toji. Now, I just want to say real quick, guys, this is the 4th unit since the free daily pull thing has come out, the monthly thing, that I've gotten a dupe on, right? Just real quick, right? A Hojo, Honored One, right? Teen Nanami. Where's it? Choso. Where's Choso? Choso and Toji all have free dupes. So, you know, this is going to be a good comparison. Toji dupe 1, Zonji dupe 1. We're going to talk about all the main points about what I think Zonji does better and what I think Toji does better, because there's things that you have to give credit to both of them for. So I basically made a spreadsheet and we're going to talk about that in today's video. But no matter which one you choose, they're going to be able to get you through tower as long as you put time and effort into it. Now, I do want to say, either or, I think do overall for an easier experience. And obviously, it's gonna be easier, but dupe 1 would be a lot better, right? Zonji dupe 0, I think, does struggle in certain things, and so does Toji, where they're both gonna flourish, especially dupe 1. Keep in mind, the minute Toji gets dupe 2, it's possible that you give Toji the benefit, because obviously his dupe 2 does give him 10% stats that Zonji does not have access to, so keep that in mind. Now, let's go into it. We're going to start with basic info. And then afterwards, we'll be able to go through the rest. So we'll be able to do that. I basically went into Photoshop and did this. Now, you guys let me know which one you think is better and why. I don't want some just, oh, this person does more damage. Give me the actual reasons, because most people saying that it does more damage don't have the units, right? So just want to make that clear. Let's get into it. Okay, so sorry, I was on the wrong thing. We're going to start with the basic info. We're going to get into Toji first. I have their kits pulled up, and Toji is on here, so big shout outs to the wiki once again. Now, what is Toji? Basically, his main damage is on alt, and the multipliers are similar to Sukuna, right? I would definitely say Sukuna's, you could technically say, are slightly higher, but overall, his multipliers are very similar. The actual damage does end up being about the same or higher. So I mean, like, the multiplier percentage-wise ends up being about the same or higher. He has 5 stacks that multiply, right? So these all increase to make it, I don't know, maybe 100%. Like, I don't know how exactly it works. If it says additional, it should be additive. I'm not smart enough, but in general, it's going to be about 2,500 to 3,000% alt. So that is pretty good. But obviously, Sukuna does crit more on his hits because he has a lot more crit rate. So keep that in mind. Now, you need to keep up the S2 to have strong crits, because essentially crit damage buffs are additive. So for example, he has 50% crit damage here. So you do 50 plus 50. So then his damage on a crit would be double, essentially, is how that works. So it does twice the damage with a crit up, right? Crit damage buff up. Keep that in mind. Now, he is consistent, but it's not amazing damage when you're not in the ult. Mainly, you're using the skill 3. Now, people are like, oh, why don't you use the skill 2? Now, the skill 2 does do decent damage if you count, like, with the bleed. However, keep in mind, the bleed doesn't crit, right? The bleeds don't crit. So this could basically be double the damage if you crit, where this is going to be that 20% extra, but you're only setting up for the ult. If you're not setting up for the ult with this bleed, and you need the combo count, specifically if you need the combo count, from what I've seen, the skill 3 is better, right? Because you're going to do less damage with this if you consider that you already have 30 counts. But if you don't have 30 counts, then it's fine to do this, but this will do more damage from what I've seen, at least, right? Keep that in mind. And he has a 160% taijutsu buff that is permanent. And I mean, you could get this if there's 2 enemies, you're getting this in about, I would like to say, like 10-ish turns. Now, keep in mind, if you use the skill 1 on 2 enemies, that's 4 counts per enemy. So you could be at 20 counts in 5 turns. So keep that in mind. There is that. It could be gotten very quick with 2 enemies. If not, it will take a bit longer. But I'd say about by turn 10 to 12, you're going to be maxed out. So for the last 18-ish turns, you're going to have this 160% taijutsu buff forever, right? Keep that in mind. And I think I also put multiple defensive mechanics. So he has heals, damage reduction, and also dodge. So very, very good. And then for Zonji, well, Zonji has mainly a 3-turn burst damage, right? Obviously with the ult. And then after the ult, he gets some extra buffs, taijutsu and black flash rate buff. Now, the best thing to do usually is skill 3. And then you do 1 skill 2. This skill 2 is going to give you a 30% damage dealt and taijutsu, 20% taijutsu buff for next turn. And then you do the skill 3 twice. The skill 3 just has a higher multiplier, right? This is probably 520, and this is 680. That extra 160%, you do feel it. Sure, you get extra buffs here, but in general, using this one is better because those buffs are not going to be that much better. They're just going to be additive buffs, as usually you're going to have a damage buffer or debuffer, and you're going to have a stat buffer like Shoko. So it won't matter to actually get these extra buffs, so keep that in mind. Where for this, it's going to be way better. Also, the break damage can be very, very strong. Also, keep in mind higher black flash damage, which does add to it. Also, higher black flash rate and higher crit damage. So it does mean that the skill 3 overall is going to just do more damage, especially if you black flash. So usually you end up using the skill 3 more. And as you can see here, ult damage is 3.5 times, but keep in mind there's certain buffs that aren't active, like the taijutsu buff here, right? So keep that in mind. But then the skill 3 damage is 2.5 times, and the skill 2 is 2.3. Now also keep in mind something. Oh wait, is it? Am I tweaking? Yeah, okay. So it does go up to 200%, right? I guess it was wrong. It does depend. So here it's 2.25, here it's 2.7, but here it's up to 3 times, right? So keep that in mind. The damage could get very high very quickly. And keep in mind, right? So this does 1500 in one turn. This could do essentially 1400 or like 1360 in a turn. So it's a lot of damage, and you're doing this for 2 turns. It gets to be very high, right? So now we got the base info. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Let's get into Toji's pros and cons first. So we're going to get kind of in depth, and I'm going to give my verdict at the end. He has very high ult damage. That's something we have to keep in mind. His ult damage is much higher than Zonji's in terms of the multipliers. Now, obviously, you don't crit on half of it, but he has the extra stats, right? Which does definitely, especially for the ones that this affects, it's very big. Because, for example, you could be doing about 2 million bleed every turn, which is very good. Very, very good. Now, permanent taijutsu buff. So why I say more varied team comp is because sometimes you won't actually need to run Shoko, right? Obviously, Shoko is a stat buffer. So instead of running Shoko, right, if you really don't need the support, maybe you're going to run another DPS because it won't be as multiplicative for Shoko. So you could run maybe Mechamaru instead, which is something that you could definitely keep in mind. And you could do extremely consistent damage every turn. Even if, obviously, it's only 400%, you have to keep in mind it's 400%, right? So you do this with a permanent multiplier increase with this stat buff, and it's definitely going to be better than people think, right? You could do a very consistent, I would say 500k to 1 million with that, which is quite a lot considering everything. The only thing is yellow isn't the best archetype for how Toji works, which is why I'm thinking we're going to get another yellow buffer soon, or debuffer, right? If we get a buffer, no, it would definitely be a damage buffer, because we have a damage increase debuffer, stat buffer, stat debuffer. So we're missing a damage increase buffer, because yes, Yaga does have, I think it's a damage, yeah, he does have a bit of a damage buff, but it's not a crazy one. So we could get a new maybe yellow Toto damage buffer that also gives crit rate. Now, why crit rate? Because then it's not only going to be Zonji getting a black flash buff. If it's Toto with a crit rate buff, that's going to help Zonji do more black flashes, because crit rate does affect black flashes to my understanding. And then it's going to allow Toji to do more crits. So it's going to help both of them, and Tinjo, because he does have a crit damage buff. So it's going to help all 3 of these guys tremendously. So I really think that a total crit rate, maybe crit damage buffer, is going to very well help them a lot with the damage buff. I don't know what I was talking about at all. I was talking about consistent damage, yeah. Anyway, we're going to move on. Let me know if I forgot something. No CE restrictions. He could do it every turn, right? Zonji, there's some turns where he kind of lacks CE. Not in his Black Flash or in his zone state if you're like doing it smart. But outside of it, sometimes you're just doing the skill 1 where Toji is going to do his skill 3, which is also going to have that permanent buff where Zonji won't really have access to that. So keep that in mind. And then good defensive mechanics, of course, with very high base stats. What you have to keep in mind is that Toji, they're both dupe 1. Toji has an extra like 700 taijutsu, but Zonji also has more levels. So you have to keep in mind Toji's stats are, actually, does it show here? I don't think they're the same. Yeah, no. Well, anyway, Toji's stats are higher, which you have to consider does play into it, right? It just does. It multiplies better. That's a part of it. And it's very, very nice that he has higher base stats. So keep that in mind. Oh, wrong one. Here we go. Problem is, his bleeds don't crit, right? So whereas Zonji, all of it, right, is just pure Black Flash damage, right? You're just getting that multiplier. Only half of it for Toji, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind, where Toji can't crit, and it's very, very important to keep that in mind, because yeah, this is very good damage, but it doesn't matter because you're not critting on it, right? So there's a huge loss of damage, where if it was a straight 2500%, right, he would obviously be doing way more, obviously, because, well, he'd be able to have that 100% extra, where now he doesn't. And his crit damage is half reliant on the C damage buff, and that could be nerfed, right? So basically, this stays up for 4 turns. It's a crit damage buff for 50%, which makes it 100%, which means you do double the damage. But if this is nerfed, you're not doing all that extra damage, which this buff is definitely, he's relying on it for the most part. His perma taijutsu buff also could be nerfed, which is kind of sucky. If that couldn't be nerfed, I think he would be, I would probably hold him in a higher regard than Zonji, but it can be nerfed. That's the problem. His skill 3 damage is not high enough, given it doesn't have any gimmicks. While his damage is consistent, his skill 3 is pure damage, but it's only 400%. Now, why is that crazy? Well, we're going to look to 2 recent units that are DPSs, being Honored One and Choso. So if we look at these two, right, this is 400%. Gojo's is, well, 650 or 750, which is crazy because he does this every turn, and it stacks. Well, I guess Toji's does too, but much slower. And then Choso, guys, it's 1200%, right? So it's like, it's a bit low. It's a bit low considering everything, right? It's not like his ult damage is that high. It's high, right? It's about Sukuna level, maybe a bit less, but it's not that high, right? To warrant it being 400%, like we're kind of past that, right? We're past this 400% meta. It should have been closer to 600. If it was 600, I think he would have been better than Zonji. I think he would have, but 400 is a bit low. 600, especially given this permanent 160% taijutsu, would have been amazing. It would have, but it's not. Because you have to keep in mind, like, a straight 400 where this isn't even worth it, like at the end, right? Keep in mind, skill 2 gives also the dot and also break damage. If the skill 3 had break damage, if it had a debuff on the enemy, a buff for himself, right? A dot, it would have been good, but it doesn't. So it does lose a bit of value there, where it's like Choso does put the bleeds, also has disruption. And yeah, I know I'm comparing to like the best unit in the game, but still, I think Toji needed a bit more on that skill 3. I'm just saying the cons, and I'm comparing it to other meta units. That's all I'm doing. And then his crit rate is only 40%, which is why I really, really hope we get a Toji that gives crit rate, because Toji would profit so much, right? Because imagine, you could do half the amount of damage if you don't crit, and he only has 40% crit rate, where with Zonji, well, I think it does differ, but I think he can get... Oh, I X'd out of Zonji. I think Zonji has higher than 40%. Does he? Well, also here it's guaranteed, which is a huge, huge advantage. But here, it's up to 60%, which is definitely higher. And if you use the skill 2, well, you can definitely get a bit. Oh, no, actually, no, sorry, it's higher because there's Black Flash right here by 50%, which I think is additive. I'm not sure. But anyway, like, you just keep that in mind, right? You have a much higher chance to Black Flash than to crit, which is unfortunate, for sure. Also, because, like, it just sucks. Like, I think his crit rate should have been higher, or he should have given himself a crit rate buff, because his crit rate is only 40%, but then his crit damage is only 50. Like, considering the bleed here, and a lot of his damage comes from bleed, I think it would have been fine giving him higher crit rate. So these are the cons. And then we're going to go to Zonji. It's very clear cut. Pros, very high burst damage. Damage can take care of mostly anything. Black Flash damage is obscene and can't be nerfed for now by tower floors. So why I'm mentioning this, especially for Zonji, well, Toji, yes, crit can't be nerfed. However, his crit damage is nerfed, right? And he doesn't crit all the time, where Zonji does crit more often. And also, his Black Flash multipliers are way higher. Right, way higher. Toji, it's max 2 times. Zonji, it's 3.5 times. His ult is almost double the Black Flash damage than Toji's crit. Insane. And then it snowballs into getting more ults as you go on, which means more zone states, more damage, crazy stuff. Now, cons, need to get lucky for Black Flashes. Same with Toji. But it's less of a thing. And especially at Dupe 0, he's susceptible to dying. Now, that's not really a problem for Toji, because obviously he has very high HP and also good defensive mechanics, right? But Zonji only has his HP. That's kind of it. Sure, there's damage reduction, but that's outside of the ult. Outside of the ult, you usually use the skill 2 to get ult rate, so keep that in mind. Toji has one very clear thing over Zonji, and that's more survivability, because Toji basically has a second life. And what I mean by that is 3.5% over 30 turns. If you check it out, 30 times 3.5, that's a whole extra life. That's a whole extra life bar that Toji has with damage reduction, with dodge, right? Where Zonji doesn't have that, right? So yes, resistance to poison is definitely good, but no actual damage reduction, which I think is very important in this meta. And low self-buff values, that's one thing Toji does have. Whereas, things with Zonji, like, he's more of a pay-to-win unit in the way if you have the full team, like Yaga, Shoko, Degumi, right, you're fine. Because the multipliers with the buffs are going to work itself out. Where Toji has his own buffs, which definitely should be accounted. Zonji, like, wow, okay, 30% Taijutsu buff. That's basically it, right? Like, most of the time, I'm only using the skill 3, which means I'm not getting any buffs besides this 30%. Where Toji has a crit damage buff, which should be not really counted for. He has the mini damage buff, and then also the insane 160% Taijutsu, which definitely needs to be counted for. So overall, my full thoughts is that Zonji is better than Toji, right? That's my thoughts. My thoughts is that Zonji is better than Toji for the main reason that his multipliers are higher and his Black Flash multipliers are higher. The problem with Toji is that a lot of his damage is held behind bleeds, and bleeds do not crit, which means you're losing out big time on the damage there, right? And Zonji works better in the yellow archetype. What I mean by that is units like Yellow Yaga, Yellow Shoko, and Degumi work within a specific time frame, right? You are able to get Zonji's attacks done within those turns, where for Toji, he's doing it all the time. So he profits more off of a team like red or green. Red has access to Nanami for damage increase, right? And Yaga, where if you give him a CE memory, you're fine, right? But the problem with yellow is you need Shoko, and you need Yaga, and you need Degumi to all have their parts in specific times, because you're not able to really give out enough memories to Shoko and Yaga to be able to warrant like doing your buffs every single turn. Where in an archetype like green, well, guess what? Choso's doing that pretty much every turn. So is Shoko, so is Geto, right? Shoko has her ult, which loops into it very nicely, but other, like Shoko, this Shoko, yellow Shoko doesn't, Teen Shoko does. So Yaga, Toji would have worked better under red also, or green, because they're more consistent with their buffs. But under the yellow archetype, Zonji works better because you're restricted to a certain time frame anyway, with the 3 units that I mentioned being Yaga, Shoko, Degumi. And also because of the fact that you get stunned more, you're in a much more weak position to where you do need healing rec bits most of the time. So I feel like Toji works better, would have worked better if we had someone that works well to be consistent like he is. If he had a damage, if there was a damage buffer for him, right, or a stat debuffer that worked like a Geto, right, or just had a lot of CE management like Choso, Teen Shoko, and Teen Nanami, I think it would have been fine. But Zonji works better in that burst scenario with yellow. His multipliers are higher, his Black Flash values are higher than Toji's crit values. So that's kind of my thoughts. Let me know what you think. I think that makes sense. However, they're both about the same tier, right? I give Zonji the edge, but I mean, now that Toji's dupe 1, I think I'm gonna thoroughly enjoy him quite a lot, actually. I think he's actually going to be quite fun. And it's kind of funny, but whenever he gets his SP buff, he's going to be crazy, right? Because his stats are very high. If they buff his skill 3 to be like 700-800%, he is going to be crazy, because this is going to be something he'll spam. If they buff the skill 3 and then maybe, I don't know, the ult, they could buff the ult or the passive. Probably the ult, though. The ult will probably be absolutely insane. So that's going to be it. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? See you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.